I'll just start. You got all my notes, right?
Oh, I should look at the notes.
Well, that would help. I mean, if you're a professional podcaster, but I'll give you.
The good news is there's no risk of that.
This is true. And the good part is it's the Thanksgiving podcast. So even better, right?
Yes. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And we're going to be short today, right? So that people don't have to, or do we have to go long because people are off work? I don't know.
I don't know. I guess we'll kind of play it by ear. I can't go too long. I got some fires out there. Alex and I have been cutting wood and dealing with the juniper trees on our own because I can't get, not big enough to get state money to help me fight the juniper trees. But
maybe you could start a water district of your own, the Iverson Water District.
But wouldn't I just pay for that myself?
Yeah, I guess probably, yes. You'd have to assess yourself first and then ask for some matching funds or some grants.
Oh, yeah, that's not a bad idea. See if I could get some matching funds. I'd at least cut the costs in half, right?
I don't think there's going to be any matching funds available for you right now, though, Brian, based on what we're hearing. In fact, related to water, a lot of people are mad because the Water Resources Department they put funded projects for localities on their list of cuts, and
a bunch of
yes, a lot of them, rural and urban, Democrat, Republican. I mean, they put some of both. Definitely, I'd say more rural, but I think you could also argue that more of these water projects are likely to happen in rural areas.
Yeah.
I think basically what we discovered in legislative days, though, is that the challenge for agencies is they have to realize the costs in a biennium that's already started. They've already spent money in that biennium. They'd probably like to have back for these cuts. We talked about this before. The later in the biennium you cut, the harder it hits because you're cutting for a whole biennium with only less than a biennium's worth of money, right? So you have, because we're almost 6 months into the biennium now. So you've lost a quarter of your money, or theoretically have spent a quarter of the money you've been allocated for that 2-year budget, right? So, I mean, and by the time we actually get to doing the cutting, it's going to be February or March. Yeah. And so then you'll already be further in. They're freezing some of their spending to the point they can, but you can't just stop paying people while we talk about the cuts. It's rough out there.
Yeah, but it wasn't too bad. Like I finalized our notes on general government, which is like Secretary of State, the governor's office.
There's a lot of politics in the general gov sub. There's politics everywhere, but it's especially political there.
There's some and it's got, there's some boring people like Department of Revenue and library and things like that. But they said they want, how you have to go through the task of like ranking, 1, 2, 3 with like,
right.
And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think there was one we said, yeah, no, we could cut all this. I think it just sounded like we sent an email to Representative Greg Smith, who's our, co-chair on that, and or co-vice chair, maybe he's co-chair. I'm not sure. But
I think he's co-chair of that sub. He's the House guy with the gavel.
Yeah,
I believe
he is co-chair. So I just looked at it. I just said, I thought it was a pretty good job by the agencies, to be honest with you, to, cut. They went through there and basically cut out some stuff. A lot of it, was kind of maybe moving some money around, right? But a lot of it was just like kind of trimming the fat. And I don't think trimming the fat really isn't a bad idea. And I think the exercise really isn't a bad one to make sure that agencies are adhering to core principles. Even Secretary of State, they cut a whole program. Like how many times have you seen a program actually get cut out of a state budget?
I think too that especially the hope in general gov is with all of the critical. It's not that no agency does anything that's critical. Of course, they're all very important, Brian. We love all of our children, but these agencies, if they're not serious and they don't get serious and they aren't run by serious people, we have a huge problem, right? You have problems with your revenue collection. You have problems with administrating every part of your government in DAS. You have problems with your elections or your records keeping or whatever, Secretary of State. All those agencies really need to be run by people who are serious. I think once you start to get into the DEQ and Water Resources Department and the business organs and the what starts to get a little loosey goosey, a little less.
Mhm.
Your housing community services starts to get a little less serious in the way that they've been run, or you start to find more of the problems. Is sort of what I think, just from my outside view of it.
I would agree. I think that, and what happens, I think, and also those, because the blocking and tackling, right? Department of Revenue is kind of a, it's not a, well, there's not a lot of politics in it, right? I mean, they have the law, they go and they collect revenue. That's their
Yeah.
job, right? I mean, it's
Yep.
not just the matter, it's the matter of fact. You can get a little political, I think, in the Secretary of State's office and some of those, but like PERS and the treasurer and all those ones, you just want real people doing real work. And then you get into, like you said, water resources, like, well, now they're choosing what programs to cut, or they're
Yep.
choosing what communities are not, shouldn't get funded. So I think that definitely gets way more political. And I think we'll see when, if I think is probably the better term when it comes to the budget stuff, if they decide to cut anything, what do they actually follow through with cutting? But I saw a bunch of stuff in there that sounded like a good idea. Let's just leave it out of this biennium. And if we go into 27 with a little extra cash balance, I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea.
Well, and then, of course, there's much more federal money that's projected to be missing from that upcoming biennium, and so you have a bigger
Yeah,
hole to fill. So you really do want to bring as much carryover as you can get.
I think so.
So I think some people will be tempted based on this revenue forecast to dial it back. And I think you got to go harder almost. And at least in the natural resource subcommittee, it felt like that folks were trying to look past the 5%, not necessarily cut more than five, but just to see what was left out and see if they could uncover anything. Not that necessarily agencies are hiding stuff, but maybe they have stuff that they didn't have to put on the list that could still
Yeah.
be sacrificed, right? And so I think that that is agencies and legislators are in that dance all the time. But when you're awash in money, I think, as we have been in the last couple of budgets, those lists don't get looked at hard enough. I think sometimes you see a few positions go, but it's usually to add something else instead. And here, there's nothing added.
Yeah.
There will be no adding. I would like to see a little bit more. And actually, I kind of think that this would be a good spot for the governor to dig in if she. We've talked, Brian, before about how we would be great advisors for her if she listened to us. She doesn't. But if she wanted to dig in and say, hey, this is a really bad budget scenario. We'll talk about gas tax in a minute, which really adds to the pain potentially there. But she should dig in and say, I'd like to close these boards and commissions for efficiency. And I think even if she took low hanging fruit that isn't a lot of money, she would gain a lot of goodwill and a lot of there'd just be a lot of benefit for her going in and doing that, saying, actually, I'm going to make she should merge two agencies
Yep.
for efficiency. She should do one merger of some kind or eliminate an agency, and she should go and eliminate some boards and commissions, and give people the impression she's serious about the budget crunch.
Yeah, streamline and shrink. And if she did a little bit of streamlining, a little bit of shrinking, she would do, I think wonders for, her record on government, but it's going to be pretty difficult for her to do that, I think. I think it's always hard to cut employees because the unions are going to be right there going, you can't, but you can do cuts without actually getting rid of employees because there are still a lot of need where we need employees. So I think that wouldn't be a bad idea. Hey, speaking of like being her advisor, let's transition into that gas tax thing because yesterday, you know, she put out a statement. I don't know if it was yesterday, day before, whatever. I mean, I think it was after um, their petition folks put out that they had over 150,000 signatures. She puts out this statement and she warned that emergency funding to keep Oregon roads and bridges safe will be immediately suspended. And she kind of went on emergency funding, blah, 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 that the legislator provided. I would say, you know, they reluctantly provided with her waiting there on the with the guillotine if they were going to vote no. Um,
Barely provided.
yeah, right, barely provided, and only Democrats, by the way, only Democrats. And she basically doubled down and said people are gonna die.
I
And I just find the rhetoric that they give her, and she's smarter than that. This is why I kind of
mhm.
want to hammer on the fact that her advisors are really just bad. Because one, their advice in the beginning should have been sign the damn thing. We probably would have fumbled our way through getting ourselves going, getting up and running, and 2, 3 weeks go by, and we wouldn't have got 150,000 signatures at that point, and things might have like normalized and people might have not, but no, instead, she gave us a reason to galvanize. She gave everybody a reason to kind of say, on top of all that, she's holding the damn thing. She's not going to put it out there. And that was dumb politically from that standpoint. And then
I
now
agree.
she's doubling down after clearly what, 12 days of signatures, they got double what they need. And now you're going to double down and say, "Oh, Oregonians, you're so wrong. People are going to die." And that blood is going to be on your hands. And like that's kind of the wrong message. Like she is just not catching the message on this one that this isn't about people dying and people don't think people are going to die because you didn't get 6 cents. So the reality is like her advisors are just like go full throttle all the way, orange man bad, doesn't matter, double down, sue everything. And like I don't think that's just bad advice. And it's really driving her negatives, I bet, back down into the hole where she was maybe going to crawl out of it a little bit by going after Trump. So,
I think that the biggest problem with everything is she governs afraid. Like she governs from a position of weakness, and so it reinforces the idea that she is weak. She doesn't step up with the housing bill to make sure that she rolls the environmental interests. She allows herself to be defeated by the environmental interests, and then when she is defeated, does nothing to cause them any pain whatsoever. There doesn't appear to be any effort at retribution at the legislators who may have or may not have committed their vote. I mean, this goes way back to the very beginning of her administration. I think back to the 25 session, you also have to look at the advice she got or the decision she made not to weigh in. That legislative leadership, who, for all intents and purposes, at least on the Senate side, generally proved in the 23 session that they struggled to put together the ability to just generally govern. Um, so there wasn't, I think, a lot of faith in legislative leadership going out of the 23. And then you had some change and some hope, but like they got halfway through or more than 2/3 of the way through the session, and the governor didn't show up until like the last couple of weeks, maybe last week
mhm.
in person. And I mean, obviously this is Monday morning quarterbacking, but if you say you're halfway through session and you don't have a transportation package anywhere close, why doesn't the governor show up and grab legislative leadership by the lapels and shake them up a little bit and say, I will come for you if you do not figure this out. And then you give them 2 more weeks. And if they don't, set your own table. She's the governor. She can show up and say, it's time to negotiate. I want so and so from the Democratic caucuses, and I want so and so from the Republican caucuses. What are you going to tell the governor? No. She says, we're going to solve transportation. We're going to do it in a bipartisan way. So, I mean, she has the ability to make these things happen. She's choosing not to do them.
Yeah.
And then you get through the session in 25. You basically give a middle finger to the legislature who's already mad at you and says, I don't care about your vacations. You call a special session that nobody asked for, nobody wanted, instead of waiting until 27 and just suffering the cuts now. Because their belief was that the cuts were going to be painful enough. And I think they started down that road, and then they realized they didn't have the buy-in of all the SEIU employees and their leadership. And so they reversed course. She's got to pick a plan and stick to it.
Yeah.
And she can't do that right now, or she doesn't appear to be capable of doing that, whether it's because she's taking advice from the wrong places or she's just divided in her own mind about it. It's time to be the governor. And even maybe she's lucky enough to have this first 4 years go and not get a ton accomplished and still get reelected. That's still very, very possible. But she could have put herself in an absolute guaranteed slam dunk, I'm winning this thing situation. And right now, she seems vulnerable, probably because she is not just to a Republican, even in a bad year with the second Trump midterm on the horizon, but from a Democratic primary, even.
Yeah. Oh, I think they were, Reagan. I'm truly convinced that the environmental community was ready to, you know, put somebody up against her. And that's why she came out with all the executive orders on the environmental crap. Because
Right,
that's all driven by that agenda to make sure she shores up her base, to make sure she goes back to them. And I bet they said, you got to do X, Y, Z. I mean, and
right,
otherwise we're going to put up a working families candidate and we're really going to screw you and make sure that you lose because I mean, remember the Steiner Hayward race? I mean, you had a treasurer candidate that was literally doing nothing on the Republican side, like literally spent nothing. And then you had Steiner who was like trying to figure out how to scrounge together $3 or $4 million to run TV ads because she was getting flanked by a working families candidate. And because the base of the Republicans are always going to be at like 42, we know that, right?
right.
Somewhere in that
So
realm.
there's not a ton of margin to play with. It's not,
No.
she doesn't have the ability to hit 60 or 65.
But all of the bad is her own doing. And I don't and again, I'm gonna go back to where I don't necessarily think it's her doing. Like she does not either she doesn't listen to good advice or
Right.
she's surrounding herself with a lot of bad advice. Because it shouldn't be too hard in the state of Oregon to have the worst governor's rating in the country. It shouldn't be that hard, especially when you got Trump and the ICE stuff happening. I mean, she should be able to parlay a lot of that stuff into, decent percentages for herself, and she's just not
Yep.
doing it. And I don't know if it's the simple fact, like you said, like part of me kind of feels like she doesn't even like the job.
I don't, and I don't understand how that's possible because the job is whatever you make it.
Yeah,
You don't have to do 52 appearances in localities every week. I mean, you just like it's whatever you make it.
yeah,
I
that's
think the
true. Good point.
legislature is a very good example of that, and she should know this. There were legislators that showed up every day and acted like it was their full-time job, and then there were the ones that knew exactly the spots they needed to be, and they stayed out of the places they shouldn't be. And they know how to put themselves in a position to win and be relevant, but they're not out there like the wannabes and the hustlers all the time where they're just like going to everything, right? When you're a brand new candidate or nobody knows who you are or you're a freshman or whatever, you just go to everything. And she's been around the block
Yeah,
and she's
yeah,
she's she's acting like nobody knows who she is. And at this point in the game, you got to start realizing people know who you are, and right now they don't like you.
yeah.
But that's so easy to change. Like I know it seems hard, but if she just did a total, and I think my question to you before I say what I'm thinking is, okay, so she finally says, yeah, my advisors are all bad, fires them all. I'm hearing maybe campaign staff are getting turned over, high level campaign staff for a campaign she hasn't announced yet. But when do you announce when you're taking one failure after another? What does she do?
Jeez.
What does she do to solve this problem, the transportation problem, to get her through? What does she do in the 26th session to set herself up to win? And so, what is it going to look like if she's serious about
Mm,
winning versus,
mm,
putting herself in a position to lose to
mm.
Drazen or Dudley or somebody else with the last name starts with D?
Yeah, that was or a first name starts with D, Danielle.
There you go.
That's a very good question. I didn't know you were going to pose that to me. I thanks though. I think on transportation, I think she's got a good interim director
Yeah.
that that she can say because the other guy's gone, right? She can use the opportunity to change that to say, I'm going to go into ODOT and I'm changing the culture. I'm going to change this to a can do ODOT instead of not. And I'm going to shelf these stupid projects that have just done nothing but cost us millions of dollars. And so I'm going to shelf them and we're going to reimagine what our projects things look like. But here's what we're gonna do is we're gonna fill potholes, we're gonna make streets happen, and we're gonna get people over the mountain safely this winter. And then we're gonna tackle this bad boy in 27 and come up with a budget that both Republicans and Democrats feel happy about because we all want roads. We all want transit.
We don't all want
I would do
transit, but
that.
I get your point. Um, yes.
Show
Okay.
some leadership in ODOT. And then I would do like you did. I was like, I'm gonna streamline the agencies. I'm going to
Yeah.
put some directives. And then you know what she should do as governor, she's kind of got to throw a couple other people under the bus. And I think, and that could be with a couple of agencies, a couple of things. That could be a couple of mayors maybe that aren't doing a good job on the housing front and some things, but not necessarily blame them. But instead of going down to Portland and saying, and going back to your base with Portland and Mayor Wilson and just say, oh, we're going to solve homelessness together, which you haven't solved. It's only gotten worse. Like, get out of there. Like, get away from Portland and go make the case to, like, Bend is your biggest. I mean, it is the engine of the state at this point. There's nothing else driving commerce besides Deschutes County. Like, get out there and start talking with some companies. Get out there and start saying, I'm going to pull this red tape, pull that red tape. And if Portland doesn't want to come along, then they better get on board or they're going to get left behind. I would do a whole reverse on Portland and just
Yeah.
say it's time for Portland to stop being the anchor and start getting on the bus because
Yeah.
not doing it right now. And so I'm going to go. And if I have to go to Eugene, if I have to go to Bend, if I have to go to Salem, if I have to go to every other city, Hillsborough, and make some things happen, I'm going to do that. And then I would embark on about a 12, 15 kind of large city tour and just be like, the state is going to go here in Portland. You guys do what you wanted. If you want to eat pizza and talk shit about people that are, you know, given testimony at your city councils with your 24 person thing, like she just needs to leave them behind for a little bit. And just instead of embracing them like she does, because they don't want to fix anything in Portland.
Yeah.
So she needs to direct, they need to pull themselves up. And I would just leave them for a bit and let those other cities kind of say, you know what, the governor's kind of done a pretty good job with these things. And that's how I would roll out my campaign is I wouldn't do it in Portland.
Nope. I think what I would do if I'm her, and
I think you're wrong.
there's a little bit more legislating in my theory, but first, so you go back to I'm looking at the slide about unemployment. Do you remember this slide from the finance and revenue meeting about the economic forecast? And it showed unemployment.
Yeah.
Portland Metro unemployment is down 3.8%. Rural is flat, and the secondary metros are the ones that are driving and keeping us basically even with 2.5% growth. And
Yeah.
those secondary metros are defined as basically what you just said: Albany, Bend, Corvallis, Eugene, Grants Pass, Medford, Salem. So, obviously what's missing from that, obviously in the Portland Metro, there's no growth happening in Portland Metro right now.
No.
There's people that are running. Maybe Clackamas, if you take Washington and Multnomah out, maybe Clackamas is growing because there's some still internal run between those two. Maybe the number's worse if the Portland Metro drops Clackamas, right? But for the most part,
I heard
you're nothing.
Clark County's doing really well in Vancouver.
Nothing. We should take Clark County. Maybe that's the play. So you know that you have these areas that are working, and so you go to Albany, Bend, Corvallis, Eugene, Grants Pass, Medford, Salem, and figure out what's one thing they can't stand about state government that's just absolutely killing them, and then go try to fix that, right? And then I think in the short session, it's take your medicine time. You set a new table on transportation, you try to do a deal, and part of that deal involves repealing the gas tax that's going to the ballot, because I think it's definitely going to the ballot at this point. And so there's gonna be egg on your face, but I think that by being real, taking your medicine, accepting the will of the voters, and not waiting for another year and a half to get, what I was going to say was Paul Holveed, where your margin is like 90-10, because that's what's going to happen here.
Yeah.
Unless SEIU spends just an unhappy amount of money, it's going to be 90-10. And so
Not for this
remember
gas tax.
remember the enviros hate this too, though. the Enviros have seen the opportunity to just kick ODOT while they're down. And by the way, it's going to be their programs that get gutted
Yeah.
if like you're talking about, the department gets serious, which I agree is another thing. But the problem for the Democrats is that they did not negotiate the first time with Republicans, either because they couldn't find a Republican at a low enough price, or because nobody was willing to deal. I suspect there's a price out there, but after the referral, I got bad news. The price just went up. So
Yeah.
the deal is going to be more expensive. It's going to be more painful. But ultimately, I think if you want to avoid the layoffs, it's take your medicine time. Alternatively, do the layoffs and just be real about it and be like, look, but at the same time you're doing the layoffs, completely restructure the agency. And I would do two things. I would say get aggressive about fixing the maintenance issues that are there with the money you have,
Yep.
and spend a lot of time telling people you're fixing those issues with signs, with communications. I mean, invest in maintenance first, and use anything left over for comms to tell people you're fixing their problems. Because ultimately, I think the lack of communication or poor communication by ODOT is a bigger problem here anyway. And so if you fix that problem, then you can tell people we're doing more with less because that's what you told us to do. If you want us to do some other stuff, we really need some more money. And I think that's real, because there are times in business when you go out and you look to expand and invest and you're like, look, we can continue to grow this thing slowly with the money that we have, the money that we make. Or if you want to invest, we're going to 10x it. We're going to 100x it pretty fast. And so prove that you can get a few things done. And that's going to give you the political cover, the political points that you need to get more money in the door. But I think you got to make a big concession. And I think the big concession actually is, all right, we're going to close some of this hole with general fund, which is the thing they've tried to avoid, that Republicans have said, no, we'll just use some general fund. And that means you're going to have to cut something else because now the general fund isn't plentiful. But I still think if you're serious about it, if you're serious about being bipartisan about it, if you're serious about serving instead of trying to be right and trying to go Democrats only, that's what you do. And I think that puts her ultimately in a better position as a leader. And it helps her get over the mistake that she's made here.
Well, the biggest problem I think she's running into is like her own party doesn't believe she's the leader, right? I mean, that's
Right.
things just get worse and worse for her. It's like when your own base and the other political leaders in your own, in the legislature are basically kind of gone, yeah, you don't need to come to my fundraiser. Yeah, it's good. I got this. You don't need to show up. I think when that stuff starts happening, which I know it is,
Yeah.
that's when you have a real problem. And you should be the leader, the rock star, the person that drives, fundraisers and all those sort of things. And it's just not happening. And so therefore, she's left herself open. And this gas tax thing, because now, even if they can't repeal and replace, because clearly 26 is going to be way too soon to try to like, repeal this
Right.
and then throw another one into the mix. Like, there's no way the Democrats are going to vote for that in the legislature. I don't care if it's anything
No.
to do anything, because clearly the Oregonians are pretty fired up, and it's not too difficult to sign. Those 150,000 people realize that it only took about 5 minutes out of their life. They're going to do it again. So you
Totally.
can't just throw down another one, and you can't do other crap either, because now the momentum is completely on the other side.
True. It's
We'll
true.
see. Now, at Reagan, what will happen is she'll probably ODOT advisors will probably say, I think what we need is a new logo. And then I think maybe what we need is a mascot. Remember Blobby? That one worked really well for the Secretary of State's office.
Oh my
We're gonna get
goodness.
some dumb shit that somebody's gonna advise her on, when the reality is that the biggest asset you have as governor is you. You and the bully pulpit and the 95 newspapers that will write whatever you want them to write.
Did you say 9 or 5 newspapers? Because I thought
I said
maybe you said,
95
wow,
newspapers that will
I
write
don't I
whatever
don't
you
even think
want.
we've got 95 newspapers left, but that's optimistic.
All right.
Maybe if you include Oregon Catalyst and folks like that. But
Online. Yeah.
But I do think like ultimately if you had a bunch of Democrats all line up to pay the political price for this, I think you have to give them a repeal vote in the short session. Otherwise, you do risk more long-term political consequences in the legislature, losing seats or something like that. If you don't give them the opportunity to
Yeah.
vote, I think there could be some that vote no because they think it's all dumb and they hate the right wing or whatever. I mean, there'll be a few of those speeches, but most of them will take the opportunity to repeal the tax and say, I've heard you, and I voted to repeal the tax, and I think that will mollify a lot of voters, which
Yeah.
is why Republicans, I hopefully they don't fall into the trap of opposing the repeal, but I think some of them will. I think some of them are going to try to say, no, now we have to vote on this, whatever, because they're worried more about the politics. And you can't, this is about what's right for Oregonians. And if we do what's right for Oregonians, we'll win. And the minute it looks political, the minute it looks like we didn't get the win in November from it, instead of just beating the tax, which is supposed to be the goal, I really do hope we don't fall into that trap because that will make us look so bad in this
Yes.
process. So we have to go all the way for all the R's have to be on board or as many as you can get, right? If Art Robinson were there, he'd still probably vote no, but I think Noah will vote yes to repeal the tax. I think he gets that part. But anyway, I think ultimately it's take your medicine time here for Democrats, and they just have to
Yeah.
decide if they want to take their medicine again alone or if they're going to do it with the Republicans. And are there Republicans left that want to help on this? I don't know anymore.
Not in 26. I mean, nobody's gonna, you're gonna have to like we gotta just start over, right? And then you're gonna have to say all the stuff that Bruce Starr had on the table, right? From the cap and trade stuff to all the things that Drazen talked about when she was the Republican leader, like all the DEI, the empty office building. Like, I mean, you gotta put all that crap on the table. And you just gotta say, all right, well, why do we need this? Why do we need that? Because why not cut some of the waste? Like, I don't know why that's a problem. It's not, you can leak, we need the employees. Everybody wants the employees to do the maintenance. Nobody's blaming that. Nobody's even talking about that. We just want to cut the waste, right? And
Well,
then,
somebody put that in there and it wasn't waste to them, and so now you're offending them by cutting their waste or calling it waste. And DEI, Brian, how dare you? I mean, that you're just telling the entire BIPOC population that they're not worth anything. And it's like once you put that much stock in these kinds of things, then it becomes impossible to pull them back because you attach such moral requirements to them that now by repealing them, it's like, well, now you're anti-moral, now you're anti-people. And it's like you have to be about results. Government has to be about results, not values. You can govern with values, but you don't process unemployment with values. You don't pave roads with values. You do that with logistics. You do that with results. And I think basically what happened is Democrats coasted off of a small results based government that Oregon had, which did okay and was run by serious people. And they started making it about morals and they started making it about which groups are underrepresented and need more. And we're going to lift them up and we're going to invest money in all these nonprofits, who, by the way, don't know anything about their public records or their staff or how much they're paying their leadership or anything like that. I mean, I saw something today that said, I think it was $1 billion of money in the Multnomah County government. Maybe it wasn't a billion, but maybe it was a billion of Multnomah County government money goes out the door to nonprofits. It's like a quarter of their general fund budget or something. That's crazy. There's no accountability. There's no way to
no,
have accountability there. And
it's all
anytime you
fake.
try to defund them, everybody goes, "Oh, so you hate the homeless and you hate the people who are addicted to drugs and you hate like the." Again, it's not about that. It's this isn't working, and you are not performing, and so it is time to go another direction. And the person who drives the accountability message in 2026 will win. If they don't run on the accountability and making government work and fixing what's wrong, I think we would get sucked into a trap of culture war issues. And we know how the culture war issues in Oregon go for the most part. It's mostly a 55-45 conversation, and it's mostly socially liberal.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of things that aren't working, I put this in the notes and I'll put it on the thing as well that the I want to switch gears to because I love talking about Portland. Um, there was an Oregon Live article, so it says Portland overnight only shelters are rarely full. So when, Reagan, my question really is when are we going to stop calling these people homeless and just start calling them drug addicts? Like, when are we going to get over this bullshit narrative that somehow they can't afford to buy a house, they can't afford to get an apartment, when the reality is homelessness is through the roof? We have shelters to put them in, but nobody wants to go there because the reality is 90% of them just want to do drugs and open air drug markets throughout Oregon and they don't want help. Like when are we going to change the narrative and stop even calling them homeless? Because it doesn't even count anymore. I mean, their their litter is on the outskirts of every town in Oregon now with their crappy vans and all the things that are parked in the poor UGBs or the areas that are right next to the communities and they're camping out there and they're just drug addicts, man, and I'm just done with it.
I think part of it has to be, yes, a realization of the actual problem. Housing is a problem, but not being able to afford, pre when it got really, really bad. I mean, land use has always driven up the price of housing in Oregon, probably for the last 10, 15, 20 years, but it's gotten acutely bad in like the last five. And not being able to afford $1,000 mortgage and now not being able to afford a $3,000 mortgage isn't the reason. You're totally right. That kind of homelessness mostly doesn't exist. Those folks end up on somebody else's couch. They're doubling up. They're renting instead of buying. They're in a hotel room instead of renting.
Yeah.
Like that's what's happening to those guys. They're not on the streets for the most part. Very rare.
No, these homeless people, when we
Yes,
say homeless as a bucket, it's just drug addicts.
yeah. I think the biggest problem is we know we have to do major investment in drug treatment, and we probably did all that we're going to be able to afford in the last session, and that won't be built out for several years. The second piece of it is that I think you have to go back to realizing that mental health is real and that you can't just treat it with outpatient. That like the Oregon State Hospital used to work and it doesn't now. Somebody broke it and it needs to be fixed. And I mean they're having all kind of turmoil in culture and they have federal judges that are doing horrible, horrible mandate requirements, but they're unfortunately sticking. And so, but we have to revert back to the old status of how we used to handle these things as much as possible. And also, I mean, we just didn't build out the mental health capacity. And so, again, it's going to be a lot of pain and very expensive to get us out of it. And so that's the hard part is there's no clear, simple way out of this problem. It's been allowed to be like this for basically 10, 15 years.
Yeah, but then
I don't know.
you talked about earlier about all the NGOs and the nonprofits that are just, bilking money. Like I mean, this homeless thing is just nothing but a multi-billion dollar homelessness complex that with a problem I don't think you can solve it. I appreciate everything you just said. I know
Yeah.
that's what the bleeding hearts think. I think, yes, mental health is a problem, but haven't we all had mental health problems? I mean, you telling me that all of a sudden now mental health is a huge issue in America and it wasn't in the 70s or the 80s when the towns were closing down because the mills were shutting down and guys couldn't find work. And so you don't think they were going through a mental health crisis at the time? Like, I, whatever happened to rub some freaking dirt on it and get back in the game, you big baby? Like, I don't know, Reagan. I'm starting to wear really, really thin on all of the excuses. And I just, at some point, if you're just a drug addict and you're just a loser, then you should go to jail. And drug dealers, we should be throwing them in jail by the dozens. Those people are murderers. Like those people, we need to up the crime on what we're doing with the drug pushers out there in the streets. I don't see any of that sort of stuff happening. We got to get the drug, we've recriminalized it, but not really. So it's just like, we have to say there's consequences to change your behavior. And if we don't create any consequences, if we don't make anything harder for somebody, they're not going to change. And it's really kind of just that simple. And so I'm supposed to pay for that more now. I'm supposed to pay for somebody else's bad parenting because now they're on fentanyl because their dad wasn't there. Save me that bullshit. I mean, save it. It's just BS, man. I just kind of figure it out. Get a job. Work three jobs. I mean, but of course, I'm white, so I'm sure I'm privileged. As you fell off your chair,
I
you're,
was reaching down for my charger to make sure my iPad stays fully charged. Which,
uh,
by the way, I'm on a newer iPad Pro now, so the camera isn't on the side of the iPad, and it doesn't look like you get a side view of me. You actually get straight up and down, which is cool. Um,
nice.
but
Well, I don't want to belabor the homeless thing. We can move on from it, but
I
I
think the
just
one thing that should
away.
be done is because I think taking them out of society to try to break the cycle is the right move, but we don't have any local jail capacity for that either. We might have some long-term prison capacity or capacity that's been given up that you could take back with staffing. And I mean, the state hospital needs satellite campuses, not just one in Junction City. It needs satellite campuses basically in every county or every multi-county area. It needs to be significant. It needs to be staffed. It's going to be expensive, but I think taking all those folks out of community helps the community and also helps the person to reset because the sober up point is correct. So I think you're on the right direction. It's really more just about convincing people it needs to be done and then finding the money to do it, which again, not to belabor the point and make it seem like it's a super simple solution, but we do spend $1 billion on healthcare for illegal immigrants. And there was a time in our
Yeah.
history in Oregon, shockingly, when we actually didn't do that. And we could go back to not doing that, or at least not go back to capping it and limiting it to women and children like we did.
Yep.
Um, that program was a lot less expensive when it was first initialized. There is money there, but there's a political price to be paid for accessing it. And this does go back a little bit to Tina and just all the Democratic leadership. You have to make a decision now. You have to make a decision about what party you want to be. Do you want to be the party of the kind of moderate Democrats who are finally talking about small business and the fact that we're losing jobs, which means we lose population, which means we can't afford anything we want to do, right, through tax revenue? Do you join that side or do you join the DSA folks? And right now, Tina and a lot of the leadership are trying to be friends to everybody, and you can't.
Nope.
So, but the DSA folks are on the rise, and that's the biggest problem is that there's more and more of them taking over the deep blue seats. And I don't think that that's inevitable. I think there'll be a small caucus of them, just as there's a Freedom Caucus at the U.S. House, right, of a few folks who are really grumpy. But the folks in the middle can figure it out for sure. And the Democrats can have and fight off the DSA folks, but people have to get ready and actually, pony up and fight them.
Yeah. Well, all right. We'll move off the homeless thing. There's probably people smarter than me to actually look for the problem, but I just start cracking down on the dealers first. Do your thing with the mental health thing.
I mean, that goes to supply.
Refocus some money there. Really
Yeah.
cramp down on the supply. And then also, cramp down on the fact that you can't sleep. Like we're not going to be okay with you just being homeless in our community. Like it's just not okay. Like it's not who we are. And go from there, I guess. But I don't know. Hey, did you see the other one that was, since we're on the Oregonian, that Grants Pass School District had to pay a $650,000 federal lawsuit, who were two former staff members who were fired for producing a video and website challenging the district's policy on recognizing students' gender identities. So
Mhm.
basically, the school district was trying to, force people to teach gender identity stuff, and these two teachers said, "Yeah, we're not going to teach that." I really feel like this whole gender transgender kind of thing is, I think it hit its apex and now it's on the way out. This social contagion, as they say, but it really seems like there's a huge shift. It doesn't feel that much in Oregon, but I definitely see it when you travel other places that people are just, they're done talking about the whole identity politics stuff. It's just, they're just over it.
I've heard anecdotally that a lot of the kind of uh, obvious pride stuff throughout some of the communities in Oregon, probably not all, probably still more relevant in Portland, has started to disappear, started to become less prominent, started to be less obvious in schools, which sort of means like you're talking about as a social contagion, where it was just a social movement that people thought was in, and so they participated, and now they won't. And you've started to see a decline in the number of kids who identify as LGBTQ plus or at least as trans. So I think from that point, I do want to make clear, though, that based on the article that I'm reading, it looks like the reason the school district got in trouble is they violated these teachers' First Amendment rights because these teachers were doing all of this opposition on their own time and they have a right to speak on their own time. And the district basically fired them for disagreeing. And that's not legal. And so they were required to reverse their policy to comply with the First Amendment and reinstate these folks in their jobs. I don't think that means the battle is won, but any sign of return on this is welcome and just means it's time to keep up the pressure. Because the minute you relax on it again, I think the minute is when it pops back up. And there's still out there signature collection for a ballot measure in 2026 to deal with this thing, which means that the fight is really just getting started. So it'll be interesting to see. They're obviously not collecting
So
their signatures as fast as the tax folks are, but it'll be interesting to see how fast they collect them and
I'm surprised
what goes to the ballot.
they should have set up shop right next to all the no gas tax.
That does sound like Oregon, doesn't it? Like passing an abortion and trans ballot measure and then also killing off a tax. I
Yeah.
mean, that's basically the socially liberal, fiscally conservative Oregon that people tend to think of.
Which is so funny because you can't be socially liberal and fiscally conservative because you gotta
Not
have
really.
the money to run all your social programs.
Right. Almost
You know,
nobody actually holds that opinion, which is very funny. It's just that
except
the
for
swing voters are anti-tax
yeah,
and tend to be a little bit more socially liberal.
it is an oddity for Oregon for sure. I mean, we find ourselves in that position because I think
So
other things are tend to pass more, and Washington's less conservative when it comes to their money, right?
I
So
agree. Yeah,
yeah.
they have the capital gains tax and all that. I mean,
Oh
they have
yeah.
some really horrible stuff up there. So, Brian, sort of to your point about holding everybody's hand, and obviously we can be all old and talk about how everybody's feelings don't need to be protected all the time. But I'm trying to reload it now, but my browser isn't working. I don't know if the Oregonian has just heard us talking about it and cut us off. But TriMet is laying off 26 people to try to close a budget gap.
Yeah.
And a couple of things I noticed in the article that were very funny was whoever the spokesman was or the person talking this article for TriMet was talking about, well, we really did our best to limit layoffs and all that. And then it also noted that none of the people who were fired were unionized, which I think is interesting too. Brian, when you're doing cuts at a business, at a government, what's your biggest expense? Is it copier paper? Is it Microsoft Office 365? What's the biggest expense usually?
People.
People. So if you're doing cuts and you're doing your best to not cut people, you're basically saying doing our best to cut, but we're not going to cut the thing that is the biggest cost. And then we write all these articles about how devastating it is. And I'm not trying to make light of anybody losing their job. That's not fun. But it's also like nobody's job is forever. Even as a small business owner, I mean, small business owners know this, you have to continually earn your customers. And you can't just get a job and then be guaranteed a job for life. You lose your job, the economy changes, things get worse. Companies make bad decisions and then they have to close and everybody gets laid off. Like these things happen. And I don't quite understand we just really tried our best not to lay anybody off, but now we have to lay people off and it's really devastating. And also we won't lay off anybody who's union because we wouldn't want the union to get mad at us because we saw how that happened with SDIU and ODOT. I just think it's interesting, like all the dynamics around that. And I don't understand that.
Well, first off, thank God. Get rid of TriMet. Like what a waste. Talk about a waste of money. I mean, I'd rather see it go to the homeless trying to solve the drug addict product problem because this panacea that somehow you can hop on a light rail and get wherever you want to go and all of the things is just it's just another dumb idea brought up by a bunch of people that, oh, wouldn't it be great if we got rid of cars and everybody could ride a light rail and they
Do
didn't
you think the reason the TriMet buses, when they studied it, were covered in meth is because the guys who are dealing the drugs are just using TriMet to move their product? Like maybe those are the main
theory.
riders. It's just people carrying drugs.
It's a good theory. Yeah. I think and
Sounds possible.
nobody rides the damn bus anymore. I mean, from the Uber stuff to I mean, there's so many different ways to get to where you need to get to if you don't have your own car that like getting on TriMet or getting on a bus is just it's archaic and stupid. It makes no sense. We're not going to be Europe. It's not going to happen. It turns out, especially in the West, things are kind of a far away from each other.
Hmm.
It's just not there's just not a use for it. And they won't get the TriMet people won't get real with the reality that they think, well, if ridership just came back, like it's not coming back. Like nobody, it's just not going to happen again. So
The downtown working buildings are still vacant, 30%.
yeah, it's not coming back. Like it's just, and also our economy is completely changing to where you don't need a shuttle a million people downtown and a million people home every day. Like you don't need to do that. Like, the way our economy is working and the way that the remote working, the partial remote, like all the things that has really changed is exposing the fact that TriMet was built to do one thing and you can't just pick up the tracks and move them. Like you can't, it's not something you can do something else with. It's like literally was built to do one thing is to take this group of people from here to there. And
Hmm.
once you no longer need those people to go from A to Z, then you're kind of screwed and there's no way out of it. And that's why I rail against public transportation because it's not useful in today's economy. It doesn't the mom or the dad that needs to drop their kid off at daycare or drop their kid off at school and then go over here and then have a meeting at 1 there and then pick their kid up at school at 3 and run them to the dentist appointment. Like how are they ever going to do that on public transportation? They're not. It's
And you see the thing that I'm getting sold on the hardest right now. I'm seeing the most ads are for the Walmart Plus, which the main thing that gets you is delivery from Walmart. It's their
yeah.
competitor to Amazon Prime. The the model, because as you brought out, and I would have to double check this, but my sense is that even in because the US is a large country, but not the largest landmass country. You still have India, you still have Russia, you still have China out there, all in the same range or bigger. I think for the most part, China is a lot more dense in terms of where they put their population. They have a few densely populated
Yeah.
cities, and then their rural areas are way less populous than our rural areas. I suspect the same is generally true. in India. I don't know that for certain, but I suspect it. And then I think Russia, because it's in a combination of countries, may not be the same. But our rural areas are still actually a little bit more heavily populated, and our population is just more spread out across our landmass. So public transit basically doesn't make sense anywhere but New York and LA, and really only small parts of those cities, right? The cores of those cities that are really dense, really, really dense. And so beyond that, you mostly have a car society with increased amount of direct delivery services. And so you're still going to need roads for that, but how you pay for them might be different. You've brought up the sort of the tax on delivery and stuff like that for the wear and tear on the roads as a potential revenue generator, right?
Hmm.
Still think they should tax rental cars, by the way. If you're working on the transportation plan and you don't put a rental car tax in, I don't know what to tell you. It's just free money. It's basically free money. It's 80% paid by out of staters. Anyway, basically the point is that you're not going to change the face of America, making people use transit, especially non-bus transit. I mean, buses are probably the only thing that you could continue to use because you can put them on the roads and there might be incentive and ways to run them. Maybe if they weren't run by governments, they'd be more effective. They just make the buses private. And then also, you're not going to force people to bike because in most of these places, you still have horrible weather at least half the year. Nobody's
Yeah.
doing that. So you're not changing the way that America is built. So stop trying to. Stop wasting money and throwing money at trying to change it. Reinvent yourself. TriMet needs to go through an actual reinvention instead of hoping and praying that eventually the 10 governors from now, half the people are going to be driving electric cars and the other half are going to be riding bicycles. That's just not reality. It's not happening.
Nope. Well,
So they need a new identity and they need a new plan on what they're going to do and focus on.
and their strategy was always like, oh, if we just built more track, more people would ride. And that is such a flawed strategy. I don't know how many times I sat there one day, I was waiting for a ride. It was at Portland Airport. And they built the line that they thought that was the panacea, right? We're going to build a line to the Portland Airport and then everybody's going to ride it. I'm like, who's going to get on? When they did that, when they planned that whole thing in my mind, I was just like, why would anybody with their luggage get on TriMed from Beaverton with their luggage to go to the airport? I mean, so I don't have to pay the $20 a day to park my car. Well, I could just get an Uber for $40 and call it a day, right? And not worry about it. And they dropped me off right at the curb. And I sat
Hey,
there and
I've picked you up
watched.
from the airport before. I didn't even charge you
Hey,
close to 40. It's
yeah.
about half that.
That's right. Actually, I think that's when I was sitting there watching the TriMet bus when I was waiting for you to come get me. And I watched three trains, Reagan, and there wasn't a soul that got off of that train or got on it. Like nobody. It's just a complete waste of money. And again, nobody is going to stand there and call it out and just be like, why are we doing this, guys? Because the two or three people that maybe rely on public transit, everybody's going to say, oh, I know somebody that they drive it, use it every day. And well, you know what? Turns out, but then I would just say, then charge them what they should pay to not have any public subsidies. So your TriMed ticket will now cost you $197 because
I just
drop all the
while
subs.
while you were talking, I haven't read this yet, but I instinctively went to bikeportland.org because I forgot to check what the greenies think about transportation right now. Here's the headline right now. This is by the publisher and the editor, Jonathan Mouse. Opinion: Oregon faces dead end if Republicans lead transportation conversation. They don't know what to do, Brian. They have no idea what to do. Should I remind you that it was Eisenhower, a Republican president, that built our original highway system?
Yeah.
Frankly, you could say he made America great by doing that and gave Americans freedom and prosperity and opportunities to move to whatever state made the most sense for them, right?
Yeah.
Which is, of course, horrible if you're trying to lock people in and don't want anyone to ever move to your state like some Oregonians do. Um,
Dude,
they
Jonathan
are
got to understand that we're on his team. Like I think biking is a way better way to get from, point A to point B than getting on a bus. I mean, like it's healthier for you. It's a little, you got 6 months a year where you can do it pretty much every day. It's not a bad thing. I'd rather see a nice strategic bike lane strategy that isn't sharing the damn road with cars first, because that's just stupid. Like, get them off the cars and get their own lanes. And then I don't have any problem with, scooters and bikes and that sort of mode of transportation to be part of
But
the discussion.
But here's the brain rot, and here's the problem. They don't actually. I don't even think Jonathan. He runs a website called Bike Portland.
Yeah.
He says during this past session, Republicans put forward a bill that would have made radical shifts in state transportation policy. The Republican proposal would have required ODOT to ignore transportation impact on greenhouse gas emissions, despite transportation being the top contributor to them. Okay, but again, is that ODOT's job? And its impacts on Oregonians who've
Yeah.
been historically left out of transportation conversations. And that's the thing. It's like, well, we've left out some people, and now we want everybody to have a voice, and everybody gets a say. And it's like, well, actually, if 75 to 95% of people drive, then there shouldn't be a 50% weight in the voice of people who bike or people
Yeah.
who use transit or people who like leave those guys on the edges where they're actually at.
Yeah.
And then the bill would have zeroed out state funding for bicycle infrastructure, rail maintenance, and construction. Okay, so what's your plan to be part of the solution? Because they were upset that the bike tax would get raised.
Yeah.
They opposed that, which of course, you would do if you're the bike population. But again, you're not contributing answers, and that's what they're attacking. This is my whole point, and this is such an irritating thing. I get it. Okay, Democrats are in charge. Okay, Democrats have the majority. I'm going pulling up my tweet from earlier because I think it was better said. I wrote, so Democrats and Tina Kotek said the Republicans don't have a workable plan. We had plenty of plans. They just don't. As again from this op-ed and from other things you see, they just don't like them. I tweeted Democrats won supermajority, so they're in charge. Republicans don't have any solutions. You only get to pick one, right? You either you can complain Republicans won't do what you want them to do, or you can just talk about how you're the one in charge and you're going to get it done. They complain about both of them at different points. It's like, be real. Either be leaders of the state and recognize that right now biking isn't the number one mode of transportation. Maybe that changes in the future. Right now, your best bet is to get people interested in electric cars, but you still have emissions and you still have to do road capacity.
Yeah.
So, and they don't want to build road capacity. So again, you're not even working with your best potential option and opportunity for building out a different transportation system that you have. And since they're not going aggressively for electric, they are not going to get electric. They're just going to continue to get more of what we've got.
Yeah, I'm okay with electric cars. I think there's some good opportunity there. I think Elon's onto something. I think all the driverless car stuff is all going to be pretty cool stuff. I mean, the more that I'm around, like when I'm down in Phoenix and everything and watching the driverless car stuff, I'm starting to get, of course I haven't been in one yet. The boys have been in one. I think
I
I
love the Waymos. They're great.
Yeah, they got in the first one on face. I put it on Facebook and they were all afraid to get in, and then it just took off and they were like, "Dad, just go so fast, it's crazy." But that sort of stuff is probably the wave of the future, but that all still needs road capacity, and bikers are always going to be a minimal amount. You're not going to have Amsterdam where everybody's riding a bike, right? It's not going to happen. So which I'm all for the bike infrastructure in some kind, paid for by bike riders, not a bike infrastructure paid for by people who drive cars. Like, how is that fair? That makes no sense whatsoever. So, as much as I'm fine with the bike, but think about like that. Remember that Earl Blumenauer like bridge or whatever over I-5? I think that thing cost like $9 billion or some crap, right? Who knows how much it was, but it took like forever for Blumenauer to finally get a bike, pedestrian kind of thing over I-5. And it's just, it's crazy to me, all that stuff that costs a lot of money. But start with getting rid of TriMet. We would save ourselves $300 million a year that we're already on top, but that's what they're losing. I don't know how much they're making, how much their budget is, but man, that would be a lot of money and we can figure it out. Hey,
What?
last topic, Reagan, for Thanksgiving, because I think we should be thankful for Uncle Phil.
Boy, he is. I am thankful for Uncle Phil. We had in our campaign office, I remember, I think I put a picture up, not of Phil Knight, but of Greg Walden, and I put a
Yeah,
crown on it. And I
yeah,
think we called him King Walden because he's the guy that's going out there and really bringing credibility. Without Walden, it's really, I think, Bring Balance is just another pack that has to raise money, right? And there's a lot of good people that are working on that. But Walden is here to bring the credibility and the know how on winning and a lot of that to the national stage and a lot of these donors who have to build trust in order to be able to deposit big checks. And it's clear Phil has a trust relationship with Greg and Bring Balance, and so he did give them 300,000,
yeah. 3 million.
30,000.
Yeah,
It
which
started with a
is
three,
yeah, it definitely did. Well, it was only 1 million in 22 when Bring Balance started, and then it's just
and
steadily
that was a
grown.
record, I believe. And
Yeah,
then he
that was
decided
quick.
the only thing that's cool about records is if you break them. So
And
Phil
Phil
went and
tends to
made
break his own record, which is kind of funny. But here's the my takeaway on Phil Knight, and I
yeah.
other donors, and I know we have a lot that listen to this and other packs, but here's why what Phil Knight did is so important. He doesn't stop trying. Like we had a setback in 24 in the legislature. We didn't win the governor's race in 22. But the thing about Phil Knight that I just truly respect in that guy is he doesn't stop trying. And I've heard him say it a few times in some of his discussions where he'll just say, I'm not going to stop trying to make Oregon better. And he understands the idea of trying to make Oregon a better place to live because he loves it here. And I think we have to tell our donors, our people, like, hey, just because Phil gave money doesn't mean you don't have to. Doesn't mean your 5 grand isn't as important as his 3 million. But the message is don't stop trying. Like it's our job. Everything we talk about on the podcast, all the sort of things that we do, it really comes down to you. I'm thankful that we're not done trying to save this state. And it's not that we want to make it wholly different or completely different or Republicans or, whack job crazies. We just want it to be a little bit better, a little bit more conservative, a little less crazy, and a little more business friendly. I mean, I don't, and the school's slightly better for our kids. We're not asking for a whole bunch. I kind of want to get rid of OSAA, but that's, a different issue for another day. But that's my thankfulness for this Thanksgiving is I'm just thankful for him not giving up on trying. And that's very important.
I think part of that too goes back to what we are talking about the beginning though, is he's not partisan. It's not like he loves everything Republicans do. He just has recognized, unfortunately, that the Democrats haven't put forward any ideas or leaders that are willing to stand up and say, hey, actually what we're doing right now isn't working in a serious way, in a way that is changing. I think that right now, if Tina wanted to turn him into a donor, she could, but she would have to make some significantly different choices. She would have to say, I care about industry. She would have to say, I care about business, and I care about that more than making sure DEQ or OHA gets to check everybody for a fever before they go to work or whatever it is, whatever the regulation is
Yeah.
that's dumb and expensive and in the way of people who just want to, these guys just want to build businesses. And to build businesses, they got to employ more people and they'll hire more people, but they won't if the economy is struggling or it's too expensive or it's too difficult.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate and I'm thankful for Uncle Phil's efficiency. He doesn't need multiple checks to get his giving to where it needs to be. He just does one because he doesn't want to have to keep buying checkbooks. So he probably still has the same checkbook for his political giving that he started whenever he started giving because he just does large checks. So he only needs
Yes.
to use one or two a cycle.
Yes, his zeros tend to be a little bit more than most people's, but that's what you can do. He does the same thing for U of O. I
Yeah.
mean, what would U of O do without Uncle Phil? I mean, are you kidding me? U of O would not be U of O without Uncle Phil.
Could you
And
imagine if U of O was at like a pivotal point in building something or accomplishing a project, and then Phil Knight comes to them and says, "Hey, what do you need to get the job done? Like, what's actually going to make this great? I heard a story that Phil went and toured what they were doing with the new stadium at U of O, and he like pointed the jumbotron and said it wasn't big enough, and so he put more zeros behind a check to make a bigger jumbotron or whatever. Like, that's the kind of guy he is. He's like, he doesn't just want it done, he wants it done right, and he wants it done well, and he wants it to work. And so if Phil Knight shows up at U of O and he's like, hey, is the stadium good? And they're like, well, we'd really like to do this thing. He's basically like, okay, what do you need to make it happen? And if they were to say no, he'd probably be that'd probably be the greatest thing that ever happened to Oregon State University, because he's an Oregon guy, but I don't think he'd take that very well. And so when you've got Phil Knight on your side, figure out how to get some stuff done, right? Figure out how to work with him and what he's willing to do for you, and then max it out. And and then come back when he comes back and says, okay, what do you need to get the job done? And then get it done.
I would agree. And I'm glad that, and like you said, I think, Congressman Walden, has been there since the beginning of this sort of reset with the legislature and kind of, raising some real money to allow us to compete. I hope our, legislative leaders now, Bruce Starr and Lucetta Elmer, both of them can really use it as a rallying cry. I mean, this and the no gas tax thing, and like, we can change our future, but we got to all do it together, and we got to get on board of not being, upset that so and so didn't get a chance to go meet with Phil. Like, who cares who brings money to the table? If the money's at the table, it's at the table, and who cares who's bringing who's the one that got the voter no gas tax thing done? It's like, not all of that stuff doesn't matter. It's all together, and that's
Everybody
the
did.
way we can win, and we have to figure out how to do that.
I also don't think of Phil as somebody who probably meets with like the assistant deputy whip. He just meets with whoever's in charge, whoever's real, whoever's getting it done. Yeah. And I'm not even sure that my dad got to meet him. He might have talked with him on the phone. Maybe one meeting. I don't think he ever.
I mean, it was his. He's got a guy. Phil's got a guy, like a handler, that kind of does that stuff, and then so you talk with them. But
is it the U of O Duck? Is that his handler?
Yeah, right. Yeah, the guy that does all the push-ups when they make touchdowns. Yeah. No, I think, and there's really no reason to, because it's not what he do. Like, we know what our job is. Let's go, do our job. And I think that's the reality of things. And but I'm glad but to your whole point, like, that's been his whole thing with U of O. It's not, he wants U of O to be a national championship caliber in every sport.
Yeah.
Because he wants Nike to be that way. And those sort of, high performers, like, that's what they want. They want high performance. And we got to level up, and we got to become high performers. Otherwise, at some point, there's not going to be an Uncle Phil anymore. And U of O is going to figure that out too. And the last thing we really need is not a Nike even being an Uncle Nike in Oregon. That would be a tragedy for the state if we lost the one company that we all, call our own, and that would be a bummer.
Well, we used to call special sessions not to pass gas taxes, but to get done whatever Nike and Intel needed to grow. And we're a long ways away from that. But that's the anti-corporate day that we're in. And so we have to adapt then. If because I think we can't just go back to the way things were. And as Republicans, we've talked about this. We can't just revert back to being the mouthpiece for corporations. We need to find a new way through. It's got to be more populist, got to be more focused on voters. But we could do that and still help people grow their businesses, which helps Oregon with tax revenue, keeps people employed, builds houses, all that stuff.
Yep. All right. Well, hey, have a great Thanksgiving.
You too, Brian. Happy
See the
Thanksgiving.
kids running around in the background. They all seem to be happy. Looks like Christmas stuff going up. All the good.
That's actually just Maggie's little basket that she plays with all the time. It might be a Christmas basket. I don't know. She uses it to carry around her stuffies, which is, by the way, the proper terminology. That's the short for stuffed animals, stuffies. Sometimes she'll call them stuffimals, which I really like. Nice. I really like stuffimals. But yes, happy Thanksgiving, you, Brian. Happy Thanksgiving to our cross-tab listeners. I'm already listening to Christmas music because I love it, but officially everyone can do that starting Thursday. It sounds like.
No, no, dude. Day
So
after
it's
Halloween.
a great time.
I pulled
Day
this stuff out
after?
the
Oh
day
man,
after.
you're even
I
worse
pulled it
than.
out like Reagan. I'm telling you. I mean, my house was
Oh,
completely.
you said the day after Halloween. That's right.
Yeah.
You've already decorated. You're already all the way
I
in.
mean,
I love it.
I got my filters on. You can't see, but I got lights up. I got everything. It's crazy.
Awesome.
Uh-oh. Alex wants to say Happy Thanksgiving.
Hey,
Oh.
what you think of this?
Oh boy.
Oh, your mutton chops? I don't know.
Hey, you should see Garrett's low-key copying me. He pulled off a slick back mustache glasses when we had our meeting the other day, yesterday.
Do you even know what
Nice.
he said there? Low key copied me. Like I don't even understand some of the stuff these days. So I don't know.
6'7". I don't know.
Reagan.
See you later, Brian.
Have a good one.